Hello and good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our second session of the day from the Retail Bulletin, Wednesday, 21st of April, 2021. Thank you for joining us. I hope you're enjoying some sunshine wherever you are. This session is about how to use customer data to drive retail experiences. We have a brilliant panel with us today, and I'll introduce them shortly. But firstly, I'm Darren. I am the MD of Williams Harding Consulting and the chair of a men's skincare brand I'm hoping you've heard of, called Scrubbed, although our biggest market is in the US. I'm hoping some of you are aware of it out there. And I also do some of these things, webinar hosting, etc., etc. And thank you to the Retail Bulletin for bringing me back to do some more of these. Always an enjoyable time to do so. My dog's around in the background, Scamp. If you've watched one of these before and you've seen me host, you know that sometimes she does make an uninvited appearance. She was well behaved for this morning's session, so we'll see how we do today. As I've mentioned, we have a brilliant panel with us today, and thanks also shout out to our sponsor. We have a panelist from our sponsor here as well, which we'll come to, but yeah, thanks to Red Eye for sponsoring the event. We can't do these events without sponsorship, so genuinely we are really appreciative of your support. Let's say hello to our esteemed panel. I'm going to call out in order of the program that you would have seen advertised. So if I may ask Josh, if you can firstly say hi and introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, hi everyone, and look forward to a good session. So I'm Josh from UK Floor and Direct. I've been there 14 years. I'm the Chief Digital Officer there, and we're a pure play flooring retailer trying to disrupt what's a quite traditional market and bring customer experience and data at the heart of that, which is why today's session is a great opportunity to talk. And yeah, been successfully doing so for a number of years now.
Thanks, Josh, and thank you for joining the panel today. Great to have you with us. Hannah, tell us about you.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Lovely to meet you all or see you all. Yeah, I'm Hannah Spicer. I've got 16 years experience working within e-commerce and digital marketing, predominantly within luxury and fashion brands, including Harvey Nichols, Stella McCartney and Kurt Geiger. And I'm now reaching my 2-year anniversary of my consulting business. So I work with smaller businesses in a similar space to drive their digital marketing and e-commerce business.
And how have you found it in the crazy world of consultancy for the last couple of years?
Very busy. I think obviously because all businesses have been forced to, focus on their e-commerce, even if they weren't previously. It's been very, very busy, which is a good thing.
Excellent. Well, thank you for joining us today as well. Much appreciated. Desi, hello. Tell us about you, sir.
Hi, good afternoon, and thank you for having me back, Darren. I really do appreciate being able to knowledge here once again. So I'm Desi. I'm currently working at a company called Victorinox. They're a Swiss-based organization. They are the originators of the Swiss Army knife, but they sell a wide array of other premium items as well. And my job really there is to help to create not just the product of their end result, which is their digital transformation that they're going through. So a new front end storefront, back end infrastructure, processes that really help them to be more agile, but then also to be able to create a much better or improve upon the current customer experience, as well as provide an amazing future one for them and their customers. I've been within the industry for over 20 years. I've worked specifically within UX for over 11. Built teams, design systems, processes are all design related, helping to fit within agile processes and so forth. So it's a privilege for me to be here. It's a privilege for me to knowledge share, and it's great to be among my esteemed panelists.
How long have you been at Victorinox now?
So around 6 months now. So it's brand new, you could say. I'm not necessarily so wet behind the ears anymore, but it feels like I've been there a lot longer. But that's been great because they've accepted me as part of their family. And what I've really learned there is that there's so much more to do, which shows that there is so much potential with regards to what they can do as they change the world for their customers.
Yeah, it's an interesting time to start a new role as well in the middle of a global pandemic.
Absolutely.
Have you actually met any of your colleagues for real yet?
Actually once. And that was,
Okay.
and actually that was when, on the very first day when I went to pick up the equipment, as it were, as we would at any new job. And then after that, it's been remote ever since.
Yeah.
So everything now is digital.
It's kind of strange when you first meet one of your, colleagues or clients in 3D, and they're an actual person and not just on a flat screen for the first time. So hopefully you'll be meeting more of them soon.
Absolutely. Cheers, Dave.
Thanks for joining us. Over to Andy from our sponsors, Redeye. Good morning, sir. Welcome back to the TRB.
Hi, good morning. Thank you. Very nice to meet you all. So yeah, my name's Andy Stockwell. I'm Chief Commercial Officer at Redeye. So we are an AI-driven marketing automation provider. So I've been with Redeye for nearly 20 years now. So I've seen a huge amount of change in that time in our industry. Prior to Redeye, I was at HP, and I was there for sort of the dot-com boom bust. So, that's probably another massive seismic change like we're going through now. So my real experience is helping brands unlock the sort of value in their data. So that's very much what brings me here today. So yeah, really good to be talking to the panel, and yeah, looking forward to questions from everyone who's out there as well.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks again for the sponsorship, and also for you personally joining the panel today as well. So audience, we'd like you to play your part, please. So whichever device you're working on, either up or bottom of the screen, there will be a Q&A button. Do please use it. We'd like you to feel able to be part of today's session. You may have a question that you particularly want to ask one of the panelists, or you might have a general question you want all the panelists to offer their view on. You might have a difference of opinion to what's something that's being said, and please do share that, and let's put it out there and have some debate. So do use Q&A. My job is to make sure that everybody is heard, and we pride ourselves on anyone that asks a question has it answered. So please do use that button. In the meantime, I will kick things off with the panel as well to get things going on this. I mean, before disruption last year, digital leaders were already using data to optimize CX. And with the rise of all of that transformation and companies having more dynamic data at their fingertips, what we hope this session will help you with is how to pivot your strategy to enable you to be more effective and extract insights in this crazy world that we're currently navigating. So that's what we're going to try and achieve. Hopefully we will. Hopefully we'll hold on to your interest, and we'll have a really good session over the next 45 minutes or so. Josh, I'm going to come to you first, if I may, to kick things off. How are you augmenting your tech and systems architecture around your data?
Yeah, so a big part for us has always been about how do we make the data accessible, and that comes in a few different stages. Firstly, it's about having it available to report on and to analyze and to derive insights from. And then we've quite quickly moved into a phase where it's how do we activate on that data in real time and augment our technology around it. So we're going through a very large technology review process at the moment that is really driven by enabling us to put a CDP, customer data platform, at the heart of our technology stack, and pipe it directly into merchandising tools, experience tools, bidding strategies. We've done a lot of work with piping that first party data into ads, Google ads and Facebook ads at the moment. That actually just brings it right to the coalface of making decisions in real time. But that's of course been a huge journey to go on over the last probably 4 years, when we really started to ramp up our drive towards activating on our data. From pretty much, we were a startup 15 years ago, so we've always been trying to use data, but it's only been the last 4 or 5 where we've started to say, how do we really build structures and frameworks around how we access and use it, as opposed to it being a bit ad hoc, and that whole adage of sometimes you've got too much data and it's in siloed systems and not actually doing a lot for you. So yeah, we've been on the march for the last 4 or 5 years on bringing that together and making it actionable through either insights or piping into real-time activation.
Correct me if I'm wrong, you are the UK's largest online floor retailer, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And has data been at the heart of that? You said sort of been on the march the last 4 or 5 years. Has part of that success been linked to your use of data and how you've applied it?
Yeah, absolutely. Trying to always push the boundaries of what the status quo is in relevant areas. Even stuff as simple as when we're talking about capturing data from inside, it doesn't have to be big data, it doesn't have to be a scary world. Just looking at breaking down. So, for example, we send a lot of free samples. That's a huge part of our business model. 50% of our revenue comes from people that have had samples. So, being able to quantify that and understand that, and do simple analysis on the propensity to convert based on the lead time from customer ordering to sample being received. And we're talking about not distribution SLAs. We're talking about real customer timeline. It doesn't matter if it's a Sunday and the postman's not delivering. That's still 24 hours in that customer's journey. And then using that to try and break down barriers of where we can improve service levels. So it's not a big data piece, but it's stitching conversion data, transaction data, through distribution and kind of time data to join that up and make sense. And we've been doing that for a long time along that journey.
It's quite refreshing to hear someone mention that the weekend is still part of a customer's mindset about how long they've been waiting for, if you like, because so many companies are still working days and don't think about them in terms of customer days. That's quite a refreshing approach to hear.
Yeah, it is, especially when that mold has been broken by the likes of Amazon, by the likes of ASOS, by the likes of Next. Like the weekend are real days. They're high shopping days in traditional sense of the word as well. So you have to break that business mold and business working days into real retail customer experience days and time, and drive change through that.
Thank you, sir. I'm sure we will talk some more in a moment, but I'm going to go to Hannah, if I may. Hannah, obviously you will be working with different businesses in your last couple of years as a marketing consultant as well. How can brands use data to make email marketing more effective? There's so much stuff that's pushed out to customers. How can they do that more effectively?
Yeah, I mean, hopefully we're away from the days of batch and blast where everything gets sent to everybody in the database. Or no, I know that there are conversations where there's pressure from the board to kind of return to that, because email is often a channel where if there are challenges over, budget for paid search or paid social or other performance channels, everyone turns back to email, right? Because it's a lower cost channel. But hopefully we're away from those days, and I think more brands are increasingly using things like segmentation and automation and personalization to make it more effective. I think a key place to start with that is looking at your engagement data. So first of all, the kind of core emails that you're sending out each week or several times a week for some brands, rather than sending that to everybody, making sure you're sending it to your kind of core engaged group. So maybe that's anyone who's opened or clicked an email in the last 4 months, for example. That's going to help keep your open click rates high, make sure that your sender reputation is protected, you're not falling into any kind of spam traps and things like that. And then anyone who is lesser engaged, I definitely encourage brands to have an automated program that talks to anyone who hasn't opened a single email, let's say in the last kind of 6 or 9 months. Try and re-engage them first of all. So whether you're talking about new services or new products, or you're even trying an incentive with them to get them engaged in your emails again. But if not, following up to say, okay, unless you click here, we'll remove you from our regular sends. You might want to include a call to action for them to follow you on social media instead, because it doesn't mean that they aren't necessarily engaging with you as a brand. They just might not be interested in email as a channel. And then making sure you're flagging that customer and you're not regularly, again, including them on your weekly communications. And it might be that when you have a sale launch or a new collection launch, you do pull these people in, but I would really encourage brands to do that as a separate send. So I'll just explain. So at Kurt Geiger, for example, we would have our kind of core engaged segment, a lesser engaged segment, and an unengaged segment. So if we were launching a sale, we would want to reach out to the whole database, but we'd make sure we sent 3 different versions. And then we could track, okay, well, actually that really unengaged segment had a pretty poor opening click rate. We got this much additional revenue, but we saw, you know, these many unsubscribes or these many complaints or spam markings, etc. And that just helps with that conversation of, again, when senior people in the business are, just send it to everybody, just include the email, include everybody in the email. You can say, well, when we do this, this is the result that we get. It's actually, we don't get much additional revenue, and we see this kind of risk to our delivery and our send reputation, if that makes sense. So
yeah, go on, please.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, so engagement, I think, is a really key way to start being more targeted. And another way is in your promotions. So if you can, I think promotions are really powerful when you want to re-engage a lapsing customer, for example. It's always going to be cheaper to re-engage that lapsing customer than acquire a new one. So reaching out to them with a unique incentive. And again, you could tier that. So perhaps your most valuable customers get 20% off their next order with you, and everybody else might get 15 or 10%. That can be really powerful to bring people back to shop with you again. And then if you've got, for example, a first-time purchaser, I know a lot of brands that I work with have a really big chunk of their database have only bought with them once. And that's a real problem. And getting someone to come back and purchase again will increase the likelihood that they then purchase a 3rd, 4th, 5th time, and then you're their kind of go-to. So I think incentives here, when you're talking to a first-time purchaser, can be another great way to kind of make your communications more targeted, get them to engage with you and shop with you again more quickly and more frequently.
I love the batch and blast terminology because, by the way, you see the dog's made an appearance, so apologies. Hopefully she'll behave. But I still think batch and blast, although I've never heard the term before, I will use it again, is still happening, certainly when I look at my inbox as well. I'm interested in your point around sort of almost a promotional hook to come back to the brand, because isn't the risk of that you start that discount drug with a customer and they kind of need that to continually re-engage with you? Or is it a useful hook one time that works that then brings them back into the family?
I think that's the hope, right? That you re-engage them, and it probably depends on why they've lapsed in the first place. But yeah, the idea is it's like a sweetener to bring them back, and then you can hit them with your, you know, your full price messaging and get them then they should go onto your post-purchase journey, right? And then you're kind of cross-selling and upselling them. But when someone has purchased with you before, but it's been a while, I think they do need an incentive to bring them back. And then hopefully they can become, you know, an active full price customer again.
Thank you for that. I'm sure we could discuss that topic alone over another panel completely. I'll come back to you for some more, Hannah. Thank you for that. Desi, over to you. So organizations are sometimes saying they are drowning in customer data, and it's hard to know, you know, what to do with so much of it. What challenges have you experienced when you kind of trying to align the organization with actionable customer data, and what suggestions would you give them to overcome any challenges in doing so? You're on mute, Desi. Desi, you're on mute.
I went on mute there.
That's all right.
To drown the background noise, but here we are.
It's probably the most overused phrase of the last 12 months. You're on mute.
Always.
Yeah.
And every now and again we get caught in that schoolboy error, don't we? I think
there's actually a range of t-shirts now with just that phrase on it as well that you can just wear around. You're on mute. But anyway, you're not now, so over to you.
Excellent. Now, it's a good question, Darren, because really when we think about it, companies always have data. They have tons and tons of data. But what I've found as I've been able to have the privilege of work with companies, work within leaders within those organizations to help align those buckets of data, is that much of the data is misaligned or it's not connected. It's in separate warehouses or data warehouses, and some of those data houses or technological platforms that house the data are somewhat either antiquated or outdated. Therefore, they lack the connectivity, or what we would know in the technical world as APIs, to be able to connect that data together. So that's kind of like what we see, but that is a great start, knowing that data does exist. It doesn't mean that, you know, it's all gone wrong. It's always kind of like, you know, the glass is half full is kind of like my real, you know, outlook upon seeing organizations in that situation. But, you know, to truly really see the bigger picture, you know, for any of our customers, I think it's important for us to understand how we can connect all of those data pockets together. That enables us to layer data and have facts instead of opinions. And that's really one of the best ways to be able to do that. So my recommendation is really to analyze and see what areas within the business does data exist, and then find ways to work out how you can connect it. And if you cannot connect the data, what are some of the other workarounds to be able to build a better picture of our customer? For example, many organizations, especially e-commerce, and I'm part of an e-commerce organization, and I've worked at previous e-commerce organizations, all involved in various different levels of transformation, some really major, some quite minor. But the whole purpose of an e-commerce site, of course, is to sell. So many of us focus on selling messaging, selling platforms, selling techniques. But do we actually understand what motivates our customers? Who they are, you know, why they do what they do, when they do what they do. Having those multiple layers enables us to be able to really tap into the emotional aspect of why somebody would want to commit and buy a product. And that's really the key, you know, the emotional aspect. That's really what makes that's what's, you could say, the turning point between someone saying, I'm not sure if I want to buy this, or actually I need this.
It's interesting, isn't it, in terms of, I think it just comes back to that point around businesses are drowning in so much of data. They just don't know how to dissect it and work with it. And I think, what advice would you give to businesses that feel they've just got too much data, they don't know where to start with it?
I think the best advice is to, from my experiences, to just take a step back. There's a phrase that I use within organizations when I've taken companies through workshops to help them understand what they could do with their data. And that phrase is look left and right before crossing the road. You know, the green cross code, so to speak. And that wasn't really meant to rhyme. But ultimately what that means is just slow down. Many organizations have great ideas, and they don't really have too much information, too much facts or data to base those ideas from, especially connected pockets of data. So, or having a spherical view or all vantage points of who their customer is. They tend to act sometimes on just one perspective, but then they miss the bigger picture of what they could really do, or how they could capitalize on the opportunity in front of them as they get to know their customer. And I mean, many customers in many senses, I mean, people in many senses, when they invest in others, they don't really care how much we know unless we know how much they care. And it's the same thing that we've seen from a data perspective versus when we've done tests, especially during this period of time, post the beginning of the pandemic, of how customers are starting to view organizations. They are buying into organizations and trusting them, because that's really the only main outlet, because most people don't have their normal way of behavior anymore. And so we're seeing that by means of how customers have increased sales in terms of what they buy, and how companies are benefiting from that who are mobile or e-commerce ready, whether that's desktop or mobile. And we're also seeing that in terms of how customers are reaching out to and contacting and interacting with organizations across different multimedia channels or social channels. So we're seeing customers invest in companies in a similar way to how they would invest in people they may be fans of, for example, perhaps in the celebrity world. So we're seeing similar behavior start to form, and patterns start to appear. So it only makes sense for companies to take a step back and just understand what picture do they have, and what areas of data within an organization can they have access to, in order to help fill in the blanks, as in remove the opinions and replace it with facts, with data. And that's really what's going to help you to have a more accurate delivery, or a more accurate picture of who your customer is. Because as you do that, then that means that whatever it is you deliver, it is more akin to what a customer would be used to, would want to engage with, and would want to return to engage with as well.
Removing opinions and replacing with facts is probably a phrase that we could apply to many things in the world right now. So thank you for that, Desi. I will come back to you to talk some more shortly. Andy, I'm going to come on to you. By the way, everybody, we are holding our audience, gone up a little bit since we started. So good work so far. Job well done. Audience, do remember, please, that you are invited for Q&A anytime. Don't hold out till the end. So use the button Q&A to ask the question, and I will make sure that it gets received by the panel. Andy, we are just slowly unlocking from lockdown number 3 here in the UK. How have marketeers been using data differently during the previous lockdowns and the one we're coming out of? And what is changing now we are slowly emerging from lockdown number 3?
Yeah, well, I suppose I'd like to start the answer with some good news, I suppose. We know we've seen a 40% increase in e-commerce, predominantly due to the lockdowns, but that's a change that we've now got. You know, people are not going to revert back to, you know, pre-pandemic shopping habits. And also, I think every pandemic, you know, even going back as far as the Black Death, is followed by a massive period of boom, especially for retail and hospitality. So we've got that to really look forward to. So yeah, we are going through a period of massive change, and that is going to accelerate now as we begin to come out of this lockdown. So I think anyone who's been out this week will have seen the high street has changed enormously. You know, a lot of those places that have moved online have left holes on the high street that have been replaced by independents. So you know, that's going to change people's perspective on the world and what they're looking for as well. So as brands have moved more and more online, and they're maybe having those retail spots where they really need them rather than just everywhere, they've got to use data more than ever before. So some of the sort of things we're seeing out there at the moment is, you know, during the pandemic, there was a massive shift towards using transactional and behavioural data more and more to understand what customers were doing, rather than just what we thought they might want to do. So, you know, at the start of the pandemic, it was right, what are they doing this week? Because everything's changed so much. You have to almost look really short term. But now we've been in this for a year, people have got a lot more data they can actually base these decisions on. So we've been building segmentation models, basically looking at who's buying just in those lockdown windows online versus who then reverts back to previous patterns. But really importantly, as we come out of the pandemic now and we start to unlock again, you know, that you've got to look at how those customers who were just buying online, how are you going to treat them now that things are open? Also, you know, there's customers out there that are starting to revert back to their pre-pandemic patterns. So, you know, they want to get out, they want to, you know, go back to wearing the sort of clothes they were wearing beforehand. You know, they're sick of jogging bottoms, they want to get back to normal life. You're also going to have a group of customers who are anxious about change, and they're going to carry on their sort of self-inflicted lockdown for many more months. So again, we've got to segment for those sorts of customers as well. And then there's probably the segment that we're all most excited about. You know, there is a group of people who still have a big amount of savings they've managed to put together during lockdown. You know, they've not been able to go abroad, they've not been able to eat out. So, you know, how can we as brands help to unlock that additional spend? So some of the other changes we're seeing, there's, you know, real big push towards local. So again, using sort of location-based data, so understanding where somebody is, what's their local store. We're seeing brands, you know, introduce the team of the local store, you know, introduce the store manager, help to make that more of a joined up experience for people. Some that I'm really liking to see at the moment is using data to basically understand who are good customers who buy online and offline. And then people have retrained some of their in-store teams to basically do sort of Zoom-based personal shopping experiences. There's some really good ways that people are starting to really join online and offline. Probably one of the biggest things we need to focus on now coming out of the pandemic as well is, you know, it's not just getting that first purchase now that doors are open. I think, you know, that will be the easiest purchase we get out of customers, you know, over the next month. It's about making sure we can get that second, third, fourth, fifth. So we've got to really focus on building journeys to basically enable people to come back again and again, because there are so many opportunities to buy now. I think we've all seen the offers that are flying around this week from those people who've been open during the pandemic, who now desperately want to hold on to those customers. So again, it's using data to understand, where do we need to give offers? Where do we need to show the value? You know, where do we need to really make sure we lock in those new customers that we've won.
I think it's been really interesting to see the way you sort of segment customers there, about the ones that can't wait to get out, the ones that are still going to kind of enforce themselves to stay home and so on. I think nothing for me demonstrated the ones that want to get out as much as some of the Primark numbers that have been coming out. And obviously people have seen, Primark have seen huge queues of people down the street, and they've been reporting some record numbers since reopening on the 12th of April. This from a retailer that's had to keep its audience engaged purely through social interaction, because they have no online channel to sell from. And so they've actually credited a lot of their relationship with their customers while they've been closed around their social channels, which has been fascinating to hear about.
Yeah, a lot of brands have done a really good job with social, you know, and again, it's that local feel, you know, local branches creating, you know, those groups to help their customers interact with them both online and in store. And I think, you know, that's the sort of, you know, having these challenges helps us improve everything for the better.
Desi, I think you wanted to just add something to this point as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that Andy and you, Dan, you both hit the nail on the head perfectly when it came to Andy talking about the temporal effects, as in whether some behaviors will stay permanently, or whether some will eventually fade out over time. I had an experience where I had an organization reach out to me independently, and they mentioned if they could ask their customer by means of a survey, what would you do in so many years or months if the vaccine became available? We now know it's available in the UK, but this is before it was being made available. Well, asking such a question is not a good idea. Many various different tests and research papers help us to understand from institutions like Baynard and NNG, and even stuff that we've been able to run ourselves at previous organizations, really show that customers in general are not very good at predicting what they will do in the future. But we can prepare what we can, you know, prepare research and activities for what we could do in the future to help get more of a view of what customers are actually doing at that point. Just like what Andy mentioned. That's a really good point, Andy.
I'm with you, Desi.
Thanks, Desi.
One of the really interesting points I always find is when you compare preference data with behavioral and transactional data, and the different views that you get based on what people think they like versus what they're actually going to do and what they're actually going to buy. So yeah, agreed.
Thank you, guys. Josh, I'm going to come back to you. I'm going to pick up from sort of the earlier point you were talking about. You were sort of augmenting your tech and systems architecture, and really to sort of continue that conversation is how can businesses take small steps around that subject without having to augment this huge, large tech structure?
Yeah, I think, as I say, touching on what Desi said as well about getting your customer data and your behavioural data in a single place. It's never really been easier with technology suites such as Google Cloud. There's a whole host of out-of-the-box integrations with CRMs and ERPs and analytics packages to start to stitch this data together. You need to have some of the right skills to enable you to do that, to identify the appropriate data mapping. But it can start small and feed out from there. They're not large commitments to these products generally. I mean, Google's whole model with Google Cloud Platform is to get your data in there. It costs you pretty much nothing to host your data, and then you start to add value and start to reintroduce that data back into the advertising or the analytics or the experience products that they sell, which are obviously holding value. So bringing the data into a single place, starting to therefore be able to analyze, use it, take interpretations from it better has to be the first step. Otherwise, you're only ever looking at a part of the story, and that's where a lot of businesses and brands can make poor decisions too quickly. To be honest, I'm also a big believer in that the data is never 100% there. But you need to get to a point of confidence where you feel as you have enough of a rounded picture to make a business decision on. So it's yeah, it's a tale of two halves. Don't be too naive that you can make an action on any flash of data that comes in front of you without seeing that it's rounded off. But at the same time, nobody has the 100% holy grail of 360-degree view and every attributable touch point and every unique identifier being mapped. It just does not exist. There's so many variables as to why that doesn't exist and will never exist, to be honest. Particularly with the changes to cookie tracking, first-party data, third-party data, anonymized data, and so on. But yeah, it's kind of in summary, getting to a point where you've got confidence in the data, it's a rounded enough view without being paralyzed trying to gain perfection, and ultimately testing those hypotheses, looking for cause and effect in your primary data, even if you can't stitch them together as an attributed effect. I don't personally believe in coincidences. So if you look at macro performance data or regionalized data to kind of test your hypothesis in, you have to take it all with a pinch of salt, but then use that as a guiding light to back further decision making on.
Thank you, sir. Why don't you believe in coincidence?
Don't know. Maybe I'm maybe because we're big Liverpool fans, and my dad said that last time Liverpool won the league before recently was when I was born. So I was like,
fair enough. Thank you for that, sir. Great answer. Thank you so much. Hannah, I'm going to come to you and talk about data sign up. So data sign up can often be a bit clunky, either online and in store, particularly if you're the customer behind the person in front of you and they're having to go through this field of questions to sign up to the mailing list and whatever. What data should retailers be asking for, either online or in store? Is there a sweet spot?
I'm a strong believer that you ask for the bare minimum, essentially, which is normally just the email address. I think if you're asking for more, you're at risk of not getting as many signups as you're looking for. And this has come up recently because I was working with a maternity retailer who sells, different products depending on what trimester you're in, and also after you've had the baby for nursing and things like that. So really relevant that they can try and understand what stage their customer is at. But when they were asking these fields at that point of sign up on the site, I think like 90% of people just didn't choose to fill in any of those radio buttons. They were just giving their email address. And then I think you're not seeing how many people just didn't sign up because they were annoyed that the form was maybe bigger than it needed to be. So I think bare minimum, which is the email address. Again, some brands ask for your first name, but I haven't ever seen, when I've kind of tested sending an email with a first name versus not, I haven't ever seen enough of an uplift for me to think that you need to ask for that at sign up. And I think anything else after that, you can build that picture of your customer afterwards. So if you don't know anything about them, but you've got your email address, that's where you can start your relationship with them. And you can then look at, what content they're engaging with, what products they're buying, what messages are resonating with them to create your bigger picture of them, your richer picture of that customer. So an example is Lululemon, which is an activewear brand. And when you first sign up to them, you get quite long emails with all of their categories, right? So yoga, running, whatever other sports that they sell. And I had some menswear in it too. And then as I was starting to, engage with particular categories or shop particular categories, they can then move forward and make that more targeted. But if you don't get someone's email address in the first place, you can't even start that process. And I think the same goes for in-store. I think somewhere that used to do it really well was Topshop. So they used to ask in a very kind of matter-of-fact way, can you give me your email address so I can send you your e-receipt? And it was almost so direct that you didn't kind of say no, you just handed it over. Yeah, totally. I think they had that down to a T. You just kind of handed it over and then walked away. But yeah, I think asking for the bare minimum and then building your picture after that is more effective than asking for more upfront. And as Andy said, they might list a load of preferences, but actually that isn't what they're interested in at the end of the day.
Thank you for that, Hannah. I'm going to come to you next, Desi, if I may. Carrying on that conversation from earlier around customer data, why is it important to view it contextually?
That's a really good question. And part of my answer is going to be coining off Hannah's point as well. And but my first really thought around that is quite brief, because it's the contextual experiences ultimately that really play a major part in setting up or framing the behavior or the attitudes of the customer. For example, we knew that was coming. So using the example of a newsletter sign up or any other type of contact or touch point with the customer where that's a first. Regardless of whatever technique you may be using, and I'm saying this to anyone who's part of the audience today, make sure that there is a connected plan as to how you engage post requesting that information. So what will you do with the information? What's the end objective? What's the bigger picture? Have you thought big, built small, delivered and repeated in your solution? Have you done that? That's a really important question to think about when we look at contextual information and why that's important. Second example is if we think about an e-commerce journey. Now, there have been many organizations perhaps that have e-commerce sites and perhaps may want to change something, an element or the size of a font, a font collection, an organism of text, as it were, on a page. Let's take the product detail page, also known as a PDP page by many within the industry. So some may say, well, let's just change the size of the font of the price and then move the price upwards. That can have a major effect on what the customer sees first to last, how they absorb and how they compute the information and how it resonates with them, what level of urgency it creates within them, because now the elements have changed. The order of what they assimilate has now changed. So using things such as being able to watch recording sessions, whether that would be some form of session replay, or doing tests where you're able to understand via an eye tracking method where customers are looking and then where they're clicking, how much they're clicking, the attractiveness rate perhaps of various elements on a page, but also the connected pages to the journey. That's the context. So understanding what they do there, where they come from. Have they come from perhaps a journey where they've had 4 or 5 steps going back and forth from search to search results, and they haven't quite found what they're looking for? So it is reasonable to potentially hypothesize that the customer could be frustrated because they haven't found the product quick enough. But then you have to frame it again contextually, an additional layer. What kind of archetype are they as a customer? Are they someone that's focused? Are they someone who is a browser? Are they someone who searches for products? Are they someone who's a researcher? There are about 4 or 5, main, you could say, categories in terms of behavior of how institutes have already framed customers in terms of the type of behavior that they kind of ensue as an overarching theme. So understanding that contextually, layering that upon what they're doing and why and how and when they are doing things within the journey will really help us to kind of like find out how we could best potentially adjust a page, not just an element and expect immediate results, because it's always connected.
Thank you, sir. I guess some of that ability to be contextual with the data is also about having the time to really go deeper into it, right, as well, and to analyze it in that way.
Yeah, in some ways, absolutely. And some of it you can actually layer up and start to prepare. So do we look at perhaps, let's just say, for example, if you work in an organization that has a design team or are building a design team or are perhaps are a designer within a design team or a researcher perhaps, are you building up projects and connecting your existing data so you know where that data exists? Are you creating a picture, perhaps a service blueprint? Are you creating an empathy map and other things that enable you to work out what are some of the mediums that you currently experience? And are you iterating upon that as we see things start to change within the local or wider environment for your customers? Josh was absolutely right. It's impossible to have a 100% snapshot of our customers when it comes to data, because so much changes all the time. I mean, even recently within the UK, for example, and this is months ago for many of us, when there was an announcement by the secular authorities that vaccines would now become available, and you can order a vaccine off a government website and have it, or a test rather, and have it delivered to your home. How did that change behaviors for customers, perhaps? Did they become slightly more fearful because now all of a sudden they realize I had it all along and I had no idea I was symptomatic? Or was it not the case and they said, I'm just going to go out anyway? How did those kinds of outside environments influence customer behavior when it came to e-commerce? That's a contextual example of how outside information or an outside action can influence what somebody does within your own world of e-commerce. It's not always easy or possible to get that information, as Josh said, but we can get the best picture possible, which gives us the best idea of how and why contextual data is so important.
Thank you, sir. We have got a couple of questions coming in. Andy, I'm going to come to you as well, and then I'll get to the questions from our audience. Andy, before I ask a couple of audience questions, how can brands just not be consumed by data overload?
Yeah, very good question. Josh answered a big part of this earlier, actually, and it's something that I will always back up. It's about making sure you can take action from that data. So something very simply that you can do, tomorrow within your teams is, make your teams produce you an action dashboard. If they're giving you insights and they're giving you factoids of information that they found within the data, how can they then go away and take 2 actions from that? And if you culturally introduce that to your business, so they're always giving you ideas how to use the data as well as just as this interesting piece of information, you'll get a huge amount of change from tomorrow from doing that. Also, again, similarly, we've got to look at what's going on out there at the moment. So, you've got to have your objectives. What are you trying to achieve? I think if you look at that first of all, you've got the makings of a plan. So at the moment, things that we know are happening. We've had a big period of discounting. We've had a big period of, helping people culturally become bargain hunters, probably even more than ever, as we've all been at home, one click away from trying to find another price of anything that we're purchasing. And then the other thing that we know is definitely coming is that we need to be more personalized than ever before. So, there's a few very big ticket items we can start to base these decisions off of. Then it's about getting the data into one place. And it's not about putting everything in there, as we've said, you don't need to cram everything, but it's things that you can then take action from. So again, doing a bit of a data audit, understand where are those silos, where is that data we didn't even know existed, what is our plans for tomorrow that we're about to bring online that's going to give us a load of more data. And we've got to make sure those things integrate to each other, because that is the best way you're going to take action. Whether that's some layer where you can have data that you can action on top of your warehouse, those are things that an individual business will need to decide. But probably the only other final point is around automation. For me, it's very much about making sure that everything you do, you've got the capability to automate as much of that as possible. Every business at the moment has been hit by resourcing issues, whether they're booming or not. There's been a real squeeze on resources out there. So by automating as much as possible is only going to help. We have clients who have over 1,000 automated campaigns, and they're bringing in maybe 10 personalized elements to each of those campaigns from a suite of hundreds of different personalization opportunities. So, you can do a huge amount of automation that takes care of a lot of your revenue generation for you.
Thank you, sir. And I'm going to move to our audience. Nikki, whoever you are, thank you for this. I'm going to come to you, Josh, if I may. But Nikki's question for each of you is, what does the panel think is the best way to leverage local engagement opportunities? So what does the panel think is the best way to leverage local engagement opportunities? Over to you first, Josh, please. Thank you, Nikki.
Yeah, I think firstly, I can't remember who it was, so forgive me, but being able to build location data into the experiences is probably one of the easiest touch points that you've got. And therefore, whatever makes it relevant in that location can easily be surfaced as part of the experience, depending on what context you're in. But that surely, even as national brands, national retailers, location, and saying, and geography is usually quite attainable in most activation areas. So the fact that it's accessible, the fact there's a local need, there's a local movement, it would just be to start to bring that into the experience, and then learn and adapt from it. Even if you don't vary by every single location from day one, you're starting to adjust behaviours in those territories where you see something unique or you see something different. So yeah.
Okay, thank you, Josh. Sorry, did I cut you off at the end there?
No, it's fine.
All right, sorry about that. Just a few seconds too early in terms of thanking you there, but thank you for that. Hannah, what's your view on that subject?
Yeah, I totally agree with Josh, and I think where you can pull that into, messaging on your website, or whether you can bring in that relevant local messaging to emails as well. I know that there are some tools that you can plug in so you can make the messaging relevant to where they are when they actually open the email. So you can say, your nearest store, but they might be in London for the day and live somewhere else. So I think something like that is really powerful too, to make, really relevant content for them.
Desi, your thoughts?
Thanks, Darren. I think for the most part, when we look at local data or locale data, as it were, I'll take, for example, if you have a business that is international, then a country could be referred to as your locale. So understanding how various different national events affect those particular locales is really important, and making sure you build that into perhaps your marketing strategy, your content strategy. Those things then feed out organically, or should, into things such as your content marketing as well, in terms of what emails go out, what communication and touch points happen between yourself as an organization and the customer, either to raise brand relevance, or whether to engage to create a hopeful sale or a returning customer. So keeping those things in mind, and making sure that, again, can be an additional layer of data. What kind of perhaps local celebrations or events happen in those particular countries or areas? That can really help you to make sure that you can prepare for that ahead of time. Even if, say, for example, you're a manufacturer of products and you create perhaps products yourself instead of just resell them, as it were, then you're in a great position to perhaps even potentially capitalize on those events ahead of time and plan and create limited edition products for those moments. Again, using the marketing and your content strategies as well to your advantage. So that's really the thought I have, Darren, around how you could perhaps leverage that to your advantage, but just make sure you have access to those levels of data. And as Andy mentioned earlier, whatever you take from those layers of data, make sure it's actionable, and make sure that you involve all aspects of the wider organization that are involved. And that way you can deliver your solution to your customers.
Thank you, sir. Andy, I'm going to change your question slightly. We've had one more question in from TRB guests, so a mystery guest, but they, in the context of application-driven services, they want to know how important Wi-Fi and LAN and WAN is, and are they built and managed to cope?
Yeah, very interesting. Personally, I think this is a very big opportunity for retailers. I think it's something that the hotel industry has done very well for many years. If you go to a hotel, you log into their Wi-Fi, you're happy to exchange data, as part of that value exchange. And they grow their databases enormously through those Wi-Fi connections, and that's a sort of opportunity that retailers have got. But what's more important about that is probably the actual use of those apps in store. Something that I still don't think we've cracked anywhere near as much as is possible is how people use mobile apps in store around local information, local offers. Actually, funny enough, probably it was about 24 years ago, I went to a lab in a big technology business where they were planning for the future, and they had an in-store shopper walking around with a mobile device that was probably about this big. It had a huge cable that went out the back of it into a mainframe that was putting things onto it, but it was presenting them in-store opportunities to buy. And we still haven't really got there yet, have we? It's not something we do every day, and that's something I'd really like to see us push the boundaries with, because the opportunity is vast. We're all glued to our mobile phones from the minute we wake up until the minute we go to sleep. So let's use those more for those sorts of opportunities.
Thank you. And by the way, the anonymous attendee revealed himself as Colin from Maintel. So thank you, Colin, for the question anyway, and I hope Andy's answer was compelling for you. We are coming to the end, actually. We've got 5 minutes left before we end the webinar. So I'm going to come to each of the panel for a closing question. We've actually had a late one in. This is from an anonymous attendee. That sounds very dramatic. Sorry if you can hear this helicopter above me in Westminster. I have no idea what it's doing, but apologies if it's noisy. Josh, to close off, a 1 minute answer. How do we substantiate some of our customer mindset thinking when we promo plan with limited data?
Yeah, I mean, when we're talking about particular customer mindset, it's qualitative data that we're really trying to look for. So I think at that point, it's trying to survey customers, user testing groups, and you don't have to have big long-term set up focus groups here. There's a lot of tools and technologies that enable you to do that quite quickly on the fly, and just pulse it, see what the response is, and then take it into action.
Thank you, sir, and thank you for being part of the panel today as well. Really appreciate your time, and wishing you guys continued success at UK Flooring Direct as well. Hannah, wrap up your time on the panel. What do you think of that customer mindset thinking piece when trying to promotional plan and having limited data?
Yeah, I absolutely second what Josh said. I think it's about, having an idea, testing it, test and learn with a small group, and then rolling it out to a wider group. It's just about looking at the data, isn't it, and testing what works.
Thank you very much. And again, also thank you to you for your contribution to the panel today, and wishing you continued success on your consultancy journey as well. Do keep in touch.
Thank you.
Desi, what's your view? You've done a lot of talking today around, that whole mindset piece and trying to put yourself in the customer's shoes. But this question is really around trying to do that and plan promotions, and actually with limited data.
Yeah, and that's a really good question as well. I think it's important to make sure that we prepare ourselves mentally, if we're in that situation, to have better and realistic expectations. So it's really setting our own expectations. Limited data equals limited success. I mean, limited in anything will equal limited results. Whilst the results will be positive, that's great, but then what can we do beyond that? Find a way to, as you deliver whatever solution that is, using limited data, to be able to glean information from that activity, from the solution, from the customers that interact with that solution. And that enables you to add to the limited data you have. I mean, everybody has to start small, but we think big about where we could possibly be and the possibilities of how well and how much we could provide in terms of customized, personalized, whatever the case may be for our customer. But you're absolutely right. Many companies do start somewhere, and it's from a very limited view. So be realistic about what you think your results will be, and whatever they are, rejoice and actually celebrate in that success, but make sure there's some actionable things that can come out of that. How can you use the data and any findings you get from that activity?
Thank you, sir. And as always, Desi, thanks for joining the panel today. Really compelling insights, and good to see you again. And good luck at Victorinox as well. Andy, our sponsors, Redeye, 1 minute wrap up, please, sir, on that subject.
Yeah, great. For me, we've got this period of massive change. So that's what we've got to embrace, that change. Change always brings risks, but it will also bring massive opportunities. So if there's anything, it's expect that, as consumers, we don't even really know what we want at the moment. So you've got to look at that engagement. That's the data that I would probably say at the moment. What are people showing an interest with? Where can we take what people are most interested in to get value from?
Thank you, sir. Thank you again to you for your panel contribution today, and also again to Redeye for sponsorship. That's it. Audience, thanks for staying with us. Thank you for your questions and interaction as well, for those of you that asked those. I hope you got the answers you were looking for, not just from the questions that were asked, but from the whole discussion we had over the last hour, which has flown by. Thank you. That wraps up the sessions at the Retail Bulletin today. It was a short and sweet day for us today. The next sessions will be coming up in May. Do check on the Retail Bulletin website for details for that. But for now, thank you from me. And again, my thanks to all of the panel, and wishing you a bright and sunny rest of your Wednesday. Take care and all the best.